Hey George, how you doing? It's Curious George. Hey Curious George, what we're going to do is read one of your stories right now. Is that okay? Great. Let's get to it, okay? I'm glad you agree. All right, buddy, here we go. This story is called The Donut Delivery. Let's see what it's all about. There's Curious George, getting ready for bed. George is always a good monkey when he's asleep, but no monkey wants to go to sleep through Saturday. This was a Saturday that cried out for something special. Donuts, the man with the yellow hat announced. That was special. Next to bananas, donuts were George's favorite food. How about eggs with those donuts? The man asked George. Please count how many we have and write it down. But when George looked for the eggs, he found there were none left to count. There are no eggs, the man asked. Why didn't you write 0? George didn't know how. Oh, what's happening here? It looks like he's showing him the importance of the number 0. Let's see what he has to say. The man with the yellow hat sat George down with some paper and a pad. See, George, the man said, 0 alone means no eggs. None. But 0 after other numbers makes them mean a lot more. Oh, look at that. See what we have? 1, 10, 100. Wow. He's teaching him. If we put a 0 after 1, that's 10. Write another 0, and that's 100. George stared hungrily at the zeros. They reminded him of donuts. That George, he looks like he's hungry. And here he is with his friend, the man with the yellow hat. Look at all that food. And let's see, what is he telling him now? Luckily for George and his empty stomach, they headed out to buy the groceries. The man stopped in front of a market. He said, I'll go in here and buy eggs while you get the donuts. Okay? George nodded as the man wrote down his order. The note said, 1 dozen donuts, please. There he is, he's teaching him. Oh, look what's happening here. George is with a friend. A furry friend at that. Let's see what's happening. As George headed to the donut shop, Charky, a friendly little dog from the neighborhood, joined him. She wanted to play, but George was too busy to stop. So she followed him into the shop. They're looking at all the delicious food. Now look here, they have a whole bunch of donuts in the background. And here George seems to be showing Charky what to do. George noticed that his order only had a little 1 on it. That did not seem like a lot for a monkey who was really hungry. George saw a pencil on the counter. He grabbed it and drew a 0 after the 1. Now the note read 10 dozen donuts. Yikes, that's a lot. I don't know if George knows what he just did, but here it looks like he's handing a note that says 100 dozen donuts, please, to the lady behind the counter. Uh-oh, let's see what happened. Then George wrote down another 0 before Mrs. D came to take his order. George, Charky, good to see you. Is that an order for your friend with the yellow hat? George handed over the paper. 100 dozen donuts, she exclaimed. That's our biggest order ever. Mrs. D hurried away to tell her husband in the kitchen. Sounds like she was excited. Ooh, look at those donuts looking yummy. Soon, Mrs. D started piling box after box on the counter. George grew worried. He hadn't realized what his zeros would do. 99, 100. You can't possibly carry them all, George, Mrs. D said. Lucky for you, we have a delivery service. Uh-oh, George looks like he's trying to make an escape with his friend. Uh-oh. Mrs. D bustled off to get some help, but George did not wait around. He grabbed 1 dozen donuts and ran away with Charky. I think he realized his mistake. Now he's making a run for it. Oh, but they seem to have all the donuts. Let's see what's going on here. George was not quick enough. Mrs. D's entire family was soon right behind him with their towering boxes of donuts. He must be running late. We took too long to make the donuts, Mrs. D cried as she rushed after George. Oh, there she is. He's telling everybody. Let's go get George. When George reached his apartment, he jumped from balcony to balcony, trying to get home as quickly as possible. Oh, poor George. He looks so tired. All that running. He's exhausted. Look at him. At first, George thought he was safe from the donut delivery. He sat down to catch his breath after running all the way home. But it wasn't long before the doorman showed the D family right up to his apartment. Uh-oh, what's going on here? George is over here. Look at him playing around with the donuts. Oh my goodness, what a mess. Funny George. Soon, 100 boxes of donuts crowded the room. George looked around. He had to do something before his friend came home. Suddenly, he had an idea. Look at George. He's always up to something, isn't he? Look at all those donuts. He's trying to hide them in the closet, it looks like. And here's George with his friend with the yellow hat. Let's see what happened. When the man with the yellow hat walked in carrying his groceries, he saw only 1 box of donuts on the table. Those smell so good, the man said. I'm sorry I didn't ask you to buy more than 1 dozen. Was George able to hide all those donuts? Not for long. George explained to the man that he had added some zeros to the order. Well, at least you learned something, the man said. But what are we going to do with all these donuts? Let's see what they came up with. Oh, look at George. He's so funny. Look at that little face. And his good patient friend. What happened? They came up with a good solution. George got 1 dozen donuts like he was supposed to, and some hard-working firefighters got the rest. How many left, George? The man asked at the end of the day. George ate the last donut from a box and held up his fingers in an O shape. 0! And there we have it. Thank you, George, for another great story. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. And we'll see you again soon.